These are the eyes of two men who were left trapped in the remote Arctic for 28 months and presumed dead by most of the outside world. At the heart of their epic struggle for survival was a cartographic lie, manufactured by an American explorer to secure US dominance in the Arctic. While the US has made headlines since 2019 about trying to buy Greenland, over 100 years ago, Danish and American explorers were already in a race to chart and establish their respective claims over its northern territories. Battling starvation, frostbite, and polar bears, this is the story of how successive Danish expeditions risked life and death to prove Greenland was just one island and not two. Greenland in our hands may be a valuable piece of our defensive armour. In the hands of a hostile interest, it could be a serious menace. These were the words of the American explorer Robert Peary, who at the end of the 19th century was a major driving force in unlocking the geography of this Arctic region. At that time, northeast Greenland still remained a blank area of the map, essentially inaccessible due to the heavy sea ice that wraps its coastline year-round. During Peary's 1891 to 1892 expedition to the region, which tracked across the northern Greenland ice sheet, Peary extrapolated from sporadic sightings that the far northeast of Greenland was separated from the mainland by a wide channel. A discovery of a separate territory here would certainly boost US claims in this region. Peary's name became stamped on maps published after the expedition, tied to the channel and distant land the Americans sighted. And so the myth of the Peary Channel was born. No food, no footgear, and several hundred miles to the ship. Our prospects are very bad indeed, Danish explorer Jørgen Brundtland wrote in his diary. Between 1906 and 1908, Brundtland was part of a Danish expedition to northeast Greenland, led by Ludvig Mylius-Erichsen, to map some of the last blank sections of this coastline. The newly discovered Peary Channel was also to be investigated. By May 1907, 6 Danes had reached the northeastern end of Greenland by dog sled. However, it was late in the season and supplies were already dwindling. Mylius-Erichsen then took the fateful decision to continue the survey, rather than head back to the ship. Along with Niels Petter Høeg Hagen and Jørgen Brundtland, they reached Independence Bay, which Peary had seen 15 years earlier. However, what Erichsen found that Peary had missed was that the bay terminated at Academy Glacier. Peary Channel did not exist, it was just a fjord. Sudden mild weather during the return journey was literally melting away their route home. Forced inland to find food, their search was in vain, and one by one they died of cold and starvation. Brundtland was the last to die. His body, along with his diary, was found the following spring by fellow expedition members, the last entry of which read, "Succumbed at 79 Fjord after attempting return across the inland ice in November. Arrived here in waning moonlight and could go no further because of frostbitten feet and darkness. The others' bodies are to be found in the middle of the fjord in front of the glacier. Hagen died on 15th of November and Mylius about 10 days after." Brundtland's diary gave no definitive clues as to their discoveries in Independence Fjord, and so the myth of Peary Channel persisted in the Denmark expedition's maps. Finding the bodies of Mylius-Erichsen and Høeg Hagen meant possibly recovering their journals and maps, data that could help settle the claim over whether Peary Land belonged to the United States or Denmark. And so in June 1909, fellow Danish explorer Ejnar Mikkelsen set sail for East Greenland in the sloop Alabama with 6 men, hoping to find answers. Half the expedition had been crowdfunded, with the Danish government matching the other half. A series of misfortunes following their departure came as an ominous omen. Firstly, the 50 dogs they had ordered from West Greenland and shipped to the Faroes all had to be shot. They had been good, strong animals, but the hardships of the voyage and perhaps thoughtless and unwarrantable treatment had quite ruined them. "We had to bring ourselves to shoot every one of them," Mikkelsen wrote in 1955. The Greenlander they had also employed as a hunter and dog handler contracted pneumonia and had to be left in the Faroes. Lastly, the ship's engine failed en route to Greenland. The reason they determined was their incompetent mechanic. Luckily, they were able to call into Iceland, where they found a willing volunteer replacement, Iversen. Little did Iversen know about the hardships he would come to suffer over the next few years. Iversen got the engine running again, and on the 25th of August, the Alabama reached a safe harbour at Shannon Island, at 75 degrees 12 minutes north, farther south than intended due to the lateness of their arrival in Greenland. Within a month, 3 of the team were sledding their way towards Brundtland's burial place on Lambert Land to to see if any trace of Mylius-Erichsen and Hagen remained. Neither bodies nor maps were found, and the three returned to the Alabama to spend the Christmas of 1909 safe and warm. Almost immediately, preparations began for the real expedition, to sled farther north towards Peary Channel and Denmark Fjord in search of cairns and records hidden within, laid by the previous Denmark expedition. Caches were laid, and in April, Mikkelsen and Iversen were once again sledding northwards. At the head of Denmark Fjord, the pair found their prize, the camp where Mylius-Erichsen, Hagen and Greenland had spent their final summer. Within one of the many cairns nearby, they found the following message. "We reached Peary's Cape Glacier and discovered that Peary Channel does not exist. Navy Cliff is joined by land to Greenland. We rechristened Independence Bay Independence Fjord." At last, they had found the evidence that Greenland was actually one island. With their objective complete, Mikkelsen and Iversen could return to the ship. Their journey home was extremely arduous. Sledding conditions were tough, and the dogs eventually all died of exhaustion or were shot for food. Limited hunting meant hunger was a constant threat, but fortunately, they could rely on food caches left by the previous Denmark expedition. Mikkelsen nevertheless contracted a near-fatal case of scurvy, and twice they accidentally poisoned themselves by eating a dog liver. 240 days and over 2,200 kilometers after their sled trip had begun, Mikkelsen and Iversen finally reached their base. But they did not find their ship and their friends, just an empty hut. Before leaving, Mikkelsen had given his crew strict orders to depart, with or without them, no later than August 15th, and it was now very much winter. The others must have gone. The hut was empty, and Iver and I alone in Greenland, east of the sun, west of the moon, and in the midst of a white hell, Mikkelsen recorded in 1955. The hut that had been built by their colleagues were from the remains of the Alabama after she was crushed by ice. The rest of the crew had been rescued by a sealing ship months before, presuming Mikkelsen and Iversen to have perished on the ice. Mikkelsen and Iversen spent the next 2 winters in Greenland, hoping for a rescue, surviving largely on a diet of muskox and supplies left by the crewmates. By all accounts, rather than descending into madness, their isolated existence was interspersed by few and relatively minor squabbles. One of the more memorable incidents during the long wait was when Iversen received a visitor. He had gone out with his rifle, but returned sooner than expected, looking rather bewildered. When asked by Mikkelsen what had happened, he replied quietly, "I've seen my grandfather. He was sitting on a stone up there. He must be dead." Iversen would later learn on his return that he had indeed died just at that time. The pair survived encounters with polar bears, and Mikkelsen lanced and drained a boil on his own neck with a sheath knife, which remarkably avoided further infection. But always they kept a watch on the horizon, hoping a ship would come their way. Before the final winter had set in, Mikkelsen and Iversen were forced to relocate to the American depot at Bass Rock, 48 kilometers to the south, where a supply of fuel could be found. To their dismay, they discovered 2 ships had already searched for them here, but had failed to reach the Alabama hut on Shalon Island. At last, on July 19, 1912, they were awakened by a sound of commotion outside their hut. Thinking it was another bear, they grabbed their rifles and ran to the door, only to be met by Paul Lillenaes, skipper of Sjöblomsten, and his crew. "Give us your rifles, boys. We come as friends." After 865 days in each other's company, Mikkelsen and Iversen were finally rescued. The pair returned to Copenhagen via Norway to a hero's welcome, and they were at last reunited with the rest of their friends from the expedition. The news that Peary Channel was indeed a myth also reached the wider world upon their return, after which it disappeared from maps of Greenland altogether. Ultimately, the United States relinquished its claims to Greenland in 1917, in conjunction with America's purchase of the Danish West Indies from Denmark, now called the US Virgin Islands. And finally, the Alabama cabin Mikkelsen and Iversen spent much of their time in Greenland in still stands on Shalon Island today, photographed here in 2010. Thanks for watching. Give a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And also check out the links below if you'd like some further reading and high resolution maps. And I'll catch you on the next one.